The world has been taken by a storm. News about aliens and alien technology now confirmed by the US government. We're gonna go over the highlights in a minute, but there are two terms that you have to know. When they talk about a skiff, that is basically an enclosed secure setting to talk about sensitive or classified information. The second one is UAP, and why they renamed it from UFO. UAP stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon, while UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. A UFO could be a normal jet that they just can't identify, while UAP is something that is an anomaly or unexplainable. Let's first introduce the people that talk to Congress.
My name is David Charles Grush.
My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves.
As you know, my name is David Fravor.
So one of the first questions that was asked of David Fravor was about a Tic Tac UAP, which was an incident that occurred in 2004. And before we go on with the interview, I'm going to show you guys the clip of that.
Like a Tic Tac. It looks like the little breath mint in larger scale, but white, oblong, no apparent flight control surfaces, no apparent visible means of propulsion, and it was maneuvering in a way that we didn't recognize, that we couldn't classify, we couldn't identify.
Mr. Fravor, the Tic Tac incident that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
None. We had a standard debrief where the backseaters went down to our carrier intel center and briefed what had happened, and that was it. No one else talked to us, and I was in the top 20 in the battle group. No one came. The captain was aware, the admiral was aware, nothing was done.
Your commanding officers provide any sort of justification?
No, because I was the commanding officer of the squadron, so no.
So from this first question, you can already tell that the US government did not want any documentation about this. They probably handled it somewhere up the ladder of command. But the scary part is this next question.
Was this incident the only UAP event that you encountered while you were a pilot?
Yes, it was.
Okay. This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it.
So after all that, we get to go on, and the question is asked on how many pilots exactly have had an encounter with a UAP.
You're working with 30 pilots right now that have had encounters with UAPs, but you've also, I believe, discussed and know of many more pilots. This is just those that you're currently working with. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I'll break that down in two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating that information with their other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal first-hand experience at the time. Since then, as I've engaged this topic, others have reached out to me to share their experiences, both on the military side as well as the commercial aviation side.
Mr. Gresh, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General, and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
So now David Grush confirmed that the government actually has UAPs or salvaged UAPs in some of the government bases.
Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation. It was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
So in short, a whistleblower investigation is basically set when someone outs information that the government wants to keep a secret. Whether it's by a non-disclosure agreement or certain security clearances, either way the government does not want that information out there. That's when an investigation is started.
Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential area, SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
So right here you can basically assume that the answer is yes, that the government has silenced people in that way. I think it's pretty safe to assume if he can answer the question but doesn't want to answer the question in Congress. And then he wanted to talk about it in a SCIF, as we've explained before, a very secure environment. However, they were denied access for that SCIF by the government.
What astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac, very briefly?
The performance, absolute performance. It was.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
Are you aware of any other reconnaissance platforms that have tracked or recorded the Tic Tac's maneuvers, maybe the NORAD system or any of the others?
I am not.
We are going to be hearing some more about the performance of these UAPs very soon.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots, and can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere, where the apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere. And that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. And that occurred over almost 8 years. And as far as I know, it's still occurring. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
What is the most vivid, concrete sighting with the naked eye of the objects that you described before, the cube-like objects?
Certainly. I think the most vivid sighting of that would have been near midair that we had at the entrance to our working area. One of these objects was completely stationary at the exact entrance to our working areas, not only geographically but also at altitude. So it was right where all the jets are going, essentially, on the eastern seaboard. The two aircraft flew within about 50 feet of the object, and that was a very close visual sighting.
And you were in one of the aircraft?
I was not. I was there when the pilot landed. He canceled the mission after, and I was there. He was in the ready room with all his gear on, with his mouth open, and I asked him what the problem was, and he said he almost hit one of those darn things.
He said he was 50 feet away from it?
Yes, sir.
And his description of the object was consistent with the description you gave us before?
A dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere.
Inside of a clear sphere?
Yes.
And with no self-evident propulsion system?
No wings, no IR energy coming off of the vehicle, nothing tethering it to the ground. And that was primarily what we were experiencing out there.
And Commander Favor, I heard you talk about speed. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
I was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
Do you want to go ahead?
I didn't have the detail to be able to tell that.
So we got within a half mile of Tic Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows, although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs, yeah.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
does that mean that there is money in the budget that is said to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
Okay. Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
So I think Congressman Moskowitz has some very good questions, and to elaborate on the speed of the Mach 2, there has been a Blackbird that is very comparable that reached Mach 3 speeds. However, it took some time to accelerate to that speed, while they're saying that the Cube UAP accelerated to Mach 2 in just a snap, so any human body would not be able to handle that. So what the last part there entails is that the taxpayer dollars are going to secret government projects unknown to even Congress. Covert dark organizations within the government, with them doing God knows what. As for the disinformation campaign, Grush stated that the government has harmed and injured people to cover up said information.
Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office. To your knowledge, is that statement correct?
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to AARO thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to AARO that I also interviewed, and I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
So Dr. Kirkpatrick was a physicist that was basically bred into the military from a very young age, so I would not be surprised if he would lie on the stand about sensitive issues like this.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress have talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up. But please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in a SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right. When do you think those programs began, and who authorized them?
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly because of sensitivities.
All right. If any of y'all want to jump in on any of this, you're more than welcome to. What level of security clearance is required to fully access these programs?
Well, anybody who has...
and I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin. So please go right ahead.
Certainly difference between member access and say somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the access adjudicative authority should be able to grant you access. Yeah.
So the TSSCI clearance is basically top secret security clearance. SCI stands for sensitive compartmented information. So you would actually have to have the top secret security clearance.
Has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
There's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Grush. And so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity... And
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
So this one is extremely interesting because we are talking about actual bodily harm here. And of course we know that the government isn't too shy from hurting people if they don't get their way. But now there's talks about UAPs harming people as well. Now that is something I want to know more about. Unfortunately, of course, in a public setting, he cannot give that information, but hopefully in the coming days, weeks, months, we get some more information from Congress here.
You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, and so with that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, and number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion, yes.
Okay. Okay.
So this part is really interesting as well. They're talking about if an alien civilization is so good, so advanced, like how are they going to be crashing here on Earth? There are multiple theories for that, whether it's the spacecrafts are not made for a human atmosphere, or the Earth's atmosphere, whether there is, a malfunction, which always happens for our technology as well. I mean, even if it is 1 in a trillion, it can still happen. But I think it's very interesting to think about. And again, he also said that they do have alien bodies. Again, hopefully it gets disclosed in this private setting and something happens wherein they would inform the public. Now that there is, on everything that is happening, we can only hope.
Well, how should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Well, I think this goes to that national security side, and you can go back through history of things showing up at certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when it tried to do it, and the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
So here I just want to add that the FLIR systems are basically thermal imaging, infrared imaging, and night vision. So those systems were disabled by this UAP or by this fleet of UAP. And the picture they had to take was a manual picture. So they had to manually go into the system and hit the picture button, basically. So they have also been saying that their weapon systems have been disengaged. And every other type of radar has been disengaged. So that is something that is, you know, potentially quite dangerous.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people, and that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some obvious next steps. Every person watching this knows that we need to meet with Mr. Grush in a secure, compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that do not put him in jeopardy and that give us the information we need. Second, I would suggest that the radar images that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more fulsome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here of the Fine Oversight Committee.
So here Mr. Gates is standing up for everyone and kind of demanding that we need Mr. Grudge in a personal meeting so that he can finally spill all the beans on everything. So hopefully Mr. Gates gets what he wants, and hopefully we will get to know more from that meeting as well, because that is what we deserve.
We have crashed craft, stated earlier. Do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super. Thank you. And I yield back.
So here it is confirmed that biologics were found, and biologics is basically a collection term of things that, you know, come from by a creature. So this could be skin cells, excrement, basically anything that comes from a living being's body. So now, of course, the curiosity is even more piqued, and I cannot wait for answers.
Have you ever seen a propulsion system that creates no thermal exhaust?
No.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determinate. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Now, was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, never felt threatened. at all.
If the aircraft was armed, do you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no, just on the performance, it would just left.
So here the question was asked if they were to engage with the UAP, whether or not they would be able to take it down or even defend themselves. And the answer is obviously no. If there is a civilization out there that has either interdimensional travel or they can travel so many light years away to find us, then that would mean that they are much more advanced than us and our weaponry would not have any effect on them.
Is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Rush?
Yes.
Raver?
Definitely.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes. Possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and the information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves?
Potentially.
Yes, sir, potentially.
Same answer, potentially.
Yeah, I'd say
Fravor.
definitely, potentially.
Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters have become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
So for this question, if they pose a threat, I don't think that they would have waited this long to do anything. I think if they wanted to do something and they are here on this planet, that they would have already taken action and, we would have been wiped out.
Is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes.
By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah.
Yes.
So I would have to disagree with this statement. I don't think that the aliens, if there are any present, I don't think they would be interested at all into any of our technology nor nuclear weapons. It would be more of a curiosity as to see what we are doing as a species, how we are growing, just like we have a zoo. That would be the intergalactic equivalent for that, I believe.
Is there any indication that the Department of Energy is involved in UAP data collection and housing?
I don't have an answer.
I can't confirm or deny that in a public setting.
And could you do it in a secure setting?
Yes.
Mr. Fravor?
No, I don't know.
I would encourage the chairman to demand that we have any and all, but in particular Mr. Grush, talk to us in a skiff. And if that access is denied, I will personally volunteer to initiate the Holman Rule against any personnel or any program or any agency that denies access to Congress.
And you know what, guys? Amen to Mr. Ogles, Congressman Ogles here, for bringing this up and for putting himself on the line like this to get this information that the people deserve. And I'm very curious to see what's gonna come from this. I hope, Mr. Ogles keeps pushing and gets the answers that we need.
Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Yes.
Okay. How were they injured? Is it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about Havana syndrome type incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you could imagine assessing an unknown unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
All right, so what I'm thinking here is when they were investigating if they have their hands on a UAP, there are probably defense systems in place, whether it's biological defenses, whether it's armed defenses in general. It would be something like a failsafe, perhaps, for the technology that they have to not fall into other species' hands or other people's or other, nations' hands. So that's what I'm thinking of. Of course, we can't know for certain until they get that skiff. And those were the highlights, guys, from the entire hearing of Congress here. I'm really looking forward to see what happens in the coming few days, months, weeks. maybe even years. Hopefully we get some concrete evidence of any, you know, new species, whether it be a hidden civilization from Earth that somehow managed to get this marvelous technology done and evolved in a certain way, whether it's aliens from outer space. It's something that I've always been curious of, something that I've always been passionate about talking about. That's why I made this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it and, you know, get the same exciting feeling that I have. And yeah, if there's any more insane news, I will see you all on the next video. Thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, please give us a like and a follow, and I'll see you all in the next one.